In the heart of a vibrant city known for its love of food, there lived a man named Marcus Langley. Marcus was not just any chef, he was a celebrity in the culinary world. With his sharp jawline, perfectly styled hair, and an ego to match, he had become a household name. His restaurant, Langley's Table Bars, was always booked months in advance, and his cooking shows attracted millions of viewers. But behind the charm and charisma lay a man who thrived on being the center of attention, and sometimes that came at the expense of others. One day, Marcus decided to host an open cooking class at his restaurant. It wasn't because he wanted to give back to the community or inspire budding chefs. No, it was because he loved the idea of people watching him work his magic. He envisioned rows of eager students hanging on to his every word, their faces lighting up as they learned from the great Marcus Langley. So, he announced the event online, promising attendees a once-in-a-lifetime experience. Tickets sold out within hours. On the morning of the class, the kitchen buzzed with excitement. The room was filled with people of all ages and backgrounds. Some were young professionals hoping to impress their dates. Others were retirees looking for a new hobby. And a few were wide-eyed teenagers dreaming of becoming the next big chef. Among them stood Emily Carter, a quiet woman in her mid-30s who seemed almost invisible in the crowd. She wore no designer clothes, carried no fancy knives, and didn't try to stand out in any way. To anyone glancing her way, she appeared to be just another ordinary participant. What no one knew, not even Marcus, was that Emily was anything but ordinary. Once upon a time, she had been one of the most celebrated chefs in the world. Her tiny bistro in Paris had earned 3 Michelin stars, a feat only achieved by the best of the best. Critics raved about her ability to elevate simple ingredients into works of art, calling her dishes poetry on a plate. But fame came at a cost. The relentless pressure, endless hours, and constant scrutiny took a toll on Emily. After years of living under the spotlight, she decided to step away from it all. She moved to this city, bought a small apartment, and started over, embracing a life of simplicity. That morning, Emily hadn't planned to attend the class. She had stumbled across the announcement while scrolling through social media and, on a whim, decided to sign up. Cooking had always been her first love, and though she no longer chased accolades, she missed the joy of creating something beautiful with her hands. This class felt like a chance to reconnect with that part of herself without the weight of expectations. As the participants gathered around, Marcus strode into the room like a rock star, taking the stage. He greeted everyone with a dazzling smile, his voice booming as he introduced himself. "Welcome, future chefs," he declared. "Today you'll learn from the best, and who knows, maybe one of you will follow in my footsteps." Emily couldn't help but roll her eyes slightly at his bravado. Still, she listened intently as he explained the plan for the day. Each participant would be assigned a dish to prepare under his guidance. Some were given relatively simple tasks like making a salad or grilling vegetables. Others received more challenging recipes, such as risotto or crème brûlée. When it was Emily's turn, Marcus glanced at her briefly before assigning her a dish so complex that even seasoned chefs would think twice about attempting it. A multi-layered seafood soufflé with saffron-infused bechamel. The assignment drew murmurs from the crowd. Everyone knew how difficult soufflés could be. They required precision, patience, and a steady hand. One wrong move, and the entire thing could collapse. As Marcus handed Emily the recipe card, he smirked. "This one's tricky," he said, his tone laced with condescension. "But don't worry, if you mess it up, I'll show you how it's done." Emily took the card without saying a word. Inside, she felt a flicker of amusement. She had made soufflés countless times during her career, often improvising flavors and techniques to wow her guests. This particular recipe was nothing compared to what she'd tackled in the past, but instead of pointing that out, she simply nodded and headed to her station. As the class began, Marcus moved around the room offering tips and critiques. He stopped frequently to demonstrate techniques, his movements flamboyant and theatrical. At one point, he scolded a young man for chopping onions too roughly, telling him, "You're murdering them. Show some respect." Another participant received a lecture on the importance of seasoning after accidentally adding too much salt to her sauce. Marcus's comments ranged from helpful to unnecessarily harsh, leaving many feeling either inspired or intimidated. When he finally reached Emily's station, he barely gave her a second glance. She worked quietly, her movements deliberate and efficient. She separated the eggs with practiced ease, whisked the whites until they formed stiff peaks, and folded them gently into the base mixture. Marcus watched her struggle slightly with the delicate process of incorporating the egg whites, mistaking her careful pace for inexperience. He muttered, shaking his head. This might be too advanced for you. Emily didn't respond. Instead, she continued working, her focus unwavering. She noticed how Marcus interacted with the other participants, criticizing their mistakes while rarely acknowledging their successes. She also observed how he seemed to thrive on being the smartest person in the room, always needing to prove himself. It reminded her of her own journey, the moments when she let her ego get the better of her, the times she forgot why she fell in love with cooking in the first place. Despite his dismissive attitude, Emily found herself enjoying the UI process. There was something comforting about losing herself in the rhythm of cooking, the familiar smells of butter and herbs filling the air. For the first time in years, she felt truly present, free from the pressures of perfection. And as she placed her soufflé in the oven, she couldn't help but smile. Whatever happened next, she knew she had done her best, and that was enough. Little did she know, her dish was about to change everything for both her and Marcus. As the cooking class progressed, Marcus continued making his rounds, stopping at each station to critique the participants' progress. His presence was both intimidating and magnetic. Some students hung on his every word, while others nervously tried to avoid his gaze. The kitchen buzzed with the clatter of knives, the sizzle of pans, and the occasional burst of laughter when someone made a light-hearted joke about their mistakes. But despite the lively atmosphere, Marcus remained focused on one thing, ensuring everyone knew he was the star of the show. When he returned to Emily's station, he barely gave her a second glance. He had already written her off as an amateur, a quiet woman who probably signed up for the class because she wanted to impress her friends or family. To him, she was just another face in the crowd, someone whose dish would likely end up overcooked, underseasoned, or worse, collapsed entirely. After all, hadn't she struggled earlier with folding the egg whites? That tiny misstep was enough for Marcus to dismiss her entirely. Emily, however, didn't seem fazed by his lack of attention. She worked with steady hands, her movements calm and deliberate. She checked the temperature of her bechamel sauce, stirring it gently to ensure it thickened evenly without forming lumps. Then she carefully folded in strands of saffron, releasing its golden hue and subtle aroma into the creamy mixture. Every step she took was precise, born from years of experience and countless hours spent perfecting her craft. Yet, she kept her head down, letting her work speak for itself rather than trying to draw attention to her skills. Marcus, meanwhile, was busy showing off. At another station, he dramatically demonstrated how to properly sear scallops, tossing them into a hot pan with a flourish. "Listen to that sizzle," he exclaimed, grinning as the sound echoed through the room. "That's the sound of perfection." Nearby, a young woman stared at him in awe, hanging onto his every word. Marcus basked in the admiration, feeding off the energy of the crowd like a performer on stage. But not everyone shared the same enthusiasm. A middle-aged man working on his risotto shot Marcus a skeptical look after receiving yet another unsolicited critique. "You're over-stirring," Marcus said sharply, pointing at the pot. "Risotto should be creamy, not gluey. Start again." The man sighed but obediently dumped his ruined dish into the trash, muttering under his breath. Across the room, a teenager attempting to make creme brulee accidentally burned the sugar topping. Marcus groaned loudly. "Too much heat. You've turned it into charcoal." "Honestly, have you ever cooked before?" His comments ranged from helpful to harsh, leaving some participants feeling inspired and others utterly deflated. Emily noticed this dynamic as she worked, observing how Marcus thrived on being the authority figure in the room. He wasn't just teaching. He was performing, using criticism as a tool to assert dominance. It reminded her of the darker side, of the culinary world, where egos often overshadowed collaboration and kindness. She had seen it happen countless times during her own career, and it was one of the reasons she had walked away from the spotlight. Still, Emily refused to let Marcus's behavior affect her. Instead, she channeled her focus into her dish, determined to create something beautiful. As her soufflé baked in the oven, she prepared the final touches, a delicate drizzle of citrus-infused oil and a sprinkle of fresh herbs. The aroma wafting from the oven was intoxicating, a rich blend of seafood, cream, and spices that hinted at the complexity of the dish inside. Emily knew the soufflé was going to turn out perfectly. She could feel it in the way the batter had risen evenly and the gentle hum of the oven maintaining the right temperature. Years of practice had taught her to trust her instincts, and they rarely led her astray. Finally, it was time for the big reveal. One by one, the participants presented their dishes to Marcus, who tasted each creation with exaggerated flair. Some received lukewarm praise, not bad, but it needs more seasoning, while others were met with scathing critiques. This is completely overcooked. Did you even follow the recipe? The tension in the room grew thicker with each passing moment, as everyone waited anxiously to see how their efforts would be judged. When it was Emily's turn, she carried her soufflé to the front table with quiet confidence. The dish looked flawless, its surface golden brown and perfectly domed, rising proudly above the rim of the ramekin. A few people murmured appreciatively at the sight, impressed by its elegance. Marcus, however, didn't seem particularly interested. He picked up his fork and cut into the soufflé without much ceremony, taking a small bite. For a split second, his expression froze. His eyes widened slightly and his lips parted as if he were about to say something but couldn't find the words. The flavors exploded in his mouth, rich, creamy, and impossibly balanced. The seafood was tender and flavorful, complemented by the subtle warmth of saffron and the brightness of citrus. Each element harmonized perfectly, creating a symphony of taste that left him momentarily speechless. The other participants watched curiously, wondering what had caused such a reaction. Marcus quickly masked his surprise, clearing his throat before speaking. "Well," he began, his voice tinged with disbelief. This is surprisingly good." Emily simply smiled, her expression unreadable. "Thank you," she said softly, her tone polite but firm. "I'm glad you liked it." Marcus frowned, sensing there was more to this woman than he had initially assumed. He glanced at her hands, noting the calluses on her fingertips, a telltale sign of someone who had spent years wielding a knife and whisk. He studied her face, searching for any hint of arrogance or pride, but found none. Instead, she radiated a quiet humility that only deepened his curiosity. "How long have you been cooking?" he asked, his tone softer now, almost cautious. Emily hesitated for a moment before answering. "Long enough," she said simply, leaving the question open-ended. Her response intrigued Marcus even further. He realized that he had underestimated her, and badly. This wasn't just some amateur who had gotten lucky. There was skill behind her dish, a level of expertise that couldn't be faked. For the first time in years, Marcus felt a flicker of doubt creep into his mind. Who was this woman, and why had she come to his class? As the rest of the participants finished presenting their dishes, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that Emily's presence in the room meant something more. He replayed the moment he tasted her soufflé, marveling at how effortlessly she had executed such a difficult recipe. It was clear that she possessed a talent far beyond anything he had encountered in recent memory. And yet, she carried herself, with none of the bravado or ego that usually accompanied greatness. By the time the class ended, Marcus knew he couldn't let Emily leave without learning more about her. As the other participants began packing up their belongings, he approached her station, his usual confidence replaced by genuine curiosity. "Emily," he said, catching her attention, "do you have a minute? I'd love to talk to you." She paused, glancing at him with a mixture of amusement and caution. "About what?" she asked, her voice calm but guarded. About your dish, Marcus replied. And maybe about you. For a brief moment, Emily considered brushing him off. She hadn't come to the class seeking recognition or validation, and she certainly didn't want to engage in a battle of egos. But something in Marcus's tone, a hint of vulnerability beneath the bravado, made her hesitate. Perhaps there was more to him than met the eye, and maybe, just maybe, this chance encounter could lead to something unexpected. "I'll stay for coffee," she said finally, meeting his gaze with a small smile, "but only if you promise to keep your critiques to yourself." Marcus chuckled, holding up his hands in mock surrender. "Deal," he said. "No critiques, just conversation." As they settled into a quiet corner of the restaurant, neither of them realized that this simple exchange would mark the beginning of a journey neither had anticipated, one that would challenge their assumptions, redefine their priorities, and ultimately change the course of their lives. The restaurant had grown quiet after the cooking class ended. The clatter of utensils and chatter of participants had faded, leaving behind a serene atmosphere punctuated only by the soft hum of the espresso machine. Marcus led Emily to a cozy corner near the window, where sunlight streamed through sheer curtains, casting golden patterns on the polished wooden table. He gestured for her to sit, his usual swagger replaced by an uncharacteristic nervousness. For once, he wasn't trying to impress anyone. He genuinely wanted to understand who this enigmatic woman was. As they sipped their coffees, Marcus began, cautiously aware that he was treading unfamiliar territory. "So," he said, leaning forward slightly, "how long have you really been cooking? And don't give me that long enough answer again." Emily chuckled softly, stirring her coffee with deliberate slowness. She seemed to be weighing her words carefully, as if deciding how much of herself she wanted to reveal. Finally, she spoke. "I used to own a small bistro in Paris," she began, her voice calm but tinged with nostalgia. "It did well, very well actually. We earned 3 Michelin stars." Marcus nearly choked on his coffee. 3 Michelin stars. That was the holy grail of the culinary world, a distinction reserved for only the most exceptional chefs. He stared at her, his mind racing. How could someone with such an illustrious background blend into obscurity so effortlessly? It didn't make sense. "You're serious?" he asked, his disbelief evident. 3 stars? Do you know how many chefs spend their entire lives chasing that kind of recognition? Emily nodded, her expression unchanged. "I do, which is why I walked away from it." Her statement hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Marcus leaned back in his chair, studying her face intently. There was no arrogance in her tone, no hint of pride or regret, just a quiet acceptance of her decision. "Why?" he asked finally, his curiosity getting the better of him. "If you don't mind me asking." Emily took a deep breath, her gaze drifting toward the window. Outside, the city bustled with life, but her thoughts seemed far away. "It's hard to explain," she said after a pause. "At first, the accolades were exciting. Every review, every award. It felt like validation for all the years of hard work. But over time, the pressure became overwhelming. The expectations, the constant scrutiny, the need to outdo myself with every dish. It started to consume me." She paused, taking another sip of her coffee before continuing. "I stopped cooking because I loved it. Instead, I cooked to prove something, to critics, to diners, even to myself. And somewhere along the way, I lost sight of why I started in the first place. So I decided to step back, to live a simpler life." Marcus listened in silence, his initial skepticism giving way to admiration. He had always admired chefs who achieved greatness, but hearing Emily talk about walking away from it all left him feeling unsettled and oddly inspired. Her story challenged everything he believed about success and ambition. In his world, climbing higher was the ultimate goal. Failure to do so was seen as weakness. Yet here was Emily, proof that there was strength in stepping off the treadmill, in choosing authenticity over accolades. "I can't imagine doing what you did," Marcus admitted, shaking his head. "Giving up all that recognition, it must have been hard." "It was," Emily replied honestly. but it was also liberating. For the first time in years, I could cook without worrying about whether my soufflé was perfect or if my plating would impress a critic. I could focus on the joy of creating something delicious, not just impressive. Her words struck a chord with Marcus. He thought about his own career, the endless hours spent perfecting recipes, the relentless pursuit of perfection, the fear of being overshadowed by younger, flashier chefs. Had he ever truly cooked for the love of it, or was he driven solely by the desire to be the best? Before he could dwell on those thoughts too deeply, Emily changed the subject. "What about you?" she asked, her tone light but probing. "How did you end up hosting cooking classes instead of running your empire?" Marcus laughed, though the sound lacked its usual bravado. "Honestly, I got bored," he admitted. "Running a restaurant is exhausting and the fame, well, let's just say it gets old after a while. I wanted to do something different, something that reminded me why I fell in love with cooking in the first place." Emily raised an eyebrow, a hint of a smile playing on her lips. "And does it remind you?" He hesitated, unsure how to answer. "Sometimes," he said finally. "But lately I've been feeling stuck. Like I'm going through the motions without really connecting with people or with food the way I used to." They sat in companionable silence for a moment, each lost in their own thoughts. Then Emily spoke again, her voice gentle but firm. "You know, Marcus, cooking isn't just about technique or presentation. It's about telling a story, sharing a piece of yourself with others. If you've lost that connection, maybe it's time to find it again." Her words lingered in the air, resonating with Marcus in ways he hadn't expected. He realized that Emily wasn't just a talented chef. She was a teacher, offering wisdom born from experience. And despite his earlier arrogance, he found himself wanting to learn from her. "Do you miss it?" he asked suddenly, surprising even himself. "Cooking professionally, I mean." Emily smiled, her eyes softening. "Sometimes," she confessed, "but I don't think I'd ever go back to the way things were. The industry has changed since I left. It's faster, louder, more competitive. I prefer the quiet now, the freedom to create without judgment." Marcus nodded, understanding her perspective even if he couldn't fully relate to it yet. "Still," he pressed, emboldened by her openness, "you must get bored too. Don't you ever feel the urge to share your talent with the world again?" Emily tilted her head, considering the question. "Maybe," she said slowly, "but it would have to be on my terms. No pressure, no expectations. Just food, for the sake of food." An idea sparked in Marcus's mind, one that grew stronger with each passing second. What if Emily could return to cooking, but in a way that aligned with her values? What if they could collaborate, combining her refined elegance with his bold creativity to create something entirely new? "What if I told you I had an idea?" Marcus ventured, his excitement bubbling to the surface. "Something that might interest you." Emily arched an eyebrow, intrigued but cautious. "Go on." "Well," Marcus began, his words tumbling out faster than he intended. "What if we worked together? Not in the traditional sense, of course. You wouldn't have to commit to anything full-time. But imagine revamping my menu, bringing your style into the mix. Together we could create dishes that are both innovative and meaningful. Dishes that tell a story." For a moment, Emily didn't respond. She studied him closely, gauging his sincerity. Marcus held his breath, realizing how much he wanted her to say yes, not just because of her talent, but because working with her might help him rediscover the passion he'd lost. Finally, she smiled, a small, thoughtful smile that hinted at possibility. "It's an interesting offer," she said, "but I'll need to think about it. Collaborations like that require trust, and I'm not sure I'm ready to dive back into the culinary world just yet." Marcus nodded, respecting her hesitation. "Of course," he said quickly. "Take your time, but please consider it. I think we could do something special together." As they parted ways later that afternoon, Marcus felt a renewed sense of purpose. Meeting Emily had shaken him in the best possible way, forcing him to confront his own insecurities and ambitions. And though he didn't know what the future held, one thing was certain. Their paths crossing had been no accident. Whether or not Emily agreed to collaborate, her influence had already begun to shape him, as a chef and as a person. Little did either of them realize that this conversation was just the beginning of a partnership that would redefine not only their careers, but also their understanding of what it meant to truly connect through food. Over the next few days, Marcus couldn't stop thinking about his conversation with Emily. Her words echoed in his mind like a melody he couldn't shake, a reminder of why he had fallen in love with cooking in the first place. He replayed their discussion over and over, analyzing every detail, from her calm demeanor to the wisdom she shared so effortlessly. For someone who prided himself on being the center of attention, Marcus found it humbling and oddly refreshing to be on the receiving end of such insight. At first, he wondered if Emily would even consider his proposal. After all, she had walked away from the culinary world for a reason, and Marcus knew better than anyone how suffocating the industry could be. The pressure to innovate, the relentless pursuit of perfection, the constant need to outshine competitors, it was enough to burn anyone out. Why would she want to return to that, even in a limited capacity? And yet something about her intrigued him. There was a spark in her eyes when she talked about food, a quiet passion that suggested she hadn't entirely left her craft behind. Determined to make his case, Marcus decided to reach out. He sent her a simple text message. "I hope you're considering my offer. I truly believe we could create something extraordinary together." To his relief, she responded within minutes. "I'll think about it," she wrote, "but don't get your hopes up just yet." Her response was vague, but it gave Marcus enough encouragement to keep trying. Over the following week, he reached out again, not with grand promises or flashy pitches, but with genuine curiosity. He asked her questions about her past, her favorite ingredients, the dishes that inspired her most. Slowly but surely, their conversations deepened, moving beyond pleasantries into territory that felt more personal. Marcus learned about the tiny bistro she once owned, tucked away in a quiet corner of Paris. He heard stories of late nights spent experimenting with flavors, of customers breaking down in tears after tasting her creations, of critics calling her work unforgettable. As they talked, Marcus began to see Emily in a new light. She wasn't just a chef, she was an artist, a storyteller who used food as her medium. Every dish she described carried meaning, whether it was a childhood memory, a tribute to a loved one, or simply a celebration of seasonal produce. Her approach was worlds apart from his own flashy, over-the-top style. Where Marcus relied on spectacle, Emily focused on subtlety. Where he chased trends, she honored tradition. It was clear that their philosophies clashed in some ways, but it was equally clear that they complemented each other in others. One evening, as they sat across from each other at a small cafe near Emily's apartment, Marcus made his pitch once more. This time, however, he approached it differently. Instead of talking about fame or accolades, he spoke from the heart. "Emily," he said, his tone earnest, "I'm not asking you to come back to the life you left behind. I know how hard that must have been for you. But what if we created something new? Something that combines your elegance with my creativity, without compromising either of our values." She looked at him thoughtfully, her fingers wrapped around her teacup. "And what does that look like?" she asked, her voice soft but probing. Marcus hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "It starts with trust," he admitted. "I've spent years building this empire, but somewhere along the way I lost sight of what really matters. You reminded me of that. So, if you agree to collaborate, I want us to do it as equals. No egos, no power struggles. Just two people working together to tell a story through food." Emily studied him, searching for any trace of insincerity. What she found instead was vulnerability, a quality she hadn't expected from someone as confident as Marcus. For the first time, she saw him not as the arrogant celebrity chef she'd encountered in the cooking class, but as a man trying to rediscover his purpose. "I'll be honest," she said finally, her voice tinged with caution. "The idea scares me. Not because I doubt your intentions, but because I don't know if I'm ready to put myself out there again. The last thing I want is to slip back into old habits. Or worse, lose the peace I've worked so hard to find. Marcus nodded, understanding her concerns completely. I get it, he said. Believe me, I do. But here's the thing. You don't have to dive in head first. We can take it slow, one menu item at a time, one event at a time. If it feels overwhelming, we stop. No questions asked. His sincerity struck a chord with Emily. She realized that Marcus wasn't just offering her a job. He was inviting her to join him on a journey of growth and reinvention. More importantly, he seemed willing to meet her halfway, respecting her boundaries while challenging her to step outside her comfort zone. After a long pause, she smiled faintly. All right, she said. Let's give it a shot, but on one condition. This stays between us until we're sure it works. No press releases, no social media posts, nothing. If we're going to do this, I want it to be for the right reasons. Relief washed over Marcus, followed by excitement. Deal, he said, extending his hand. No publicity until we're both comfortable. They shook hands, sealing the agreement with a sense of mutual respect that neither had anticipated. As they parted ways that night, Marcus felt a surge of optimism he hadn't experienced in years. For the first time in a long time, he wasn't thinking about reviews or ratings. Instead, he was envisioning plates filled with soulful, meaningful dishes. Dishes that told a story, not just satisfied hunger. The collaboration began tentatively, with Emily visiting Marcus's restaurant during off hours to experiment in the kitchen. At first, she kept a low profile, observing the staff and familiarizing herself with the equipment. Marcus gave her free rein, stepping back to let her lead. It was a role reversal that felt strange at first, but also liberating. Gone was the brash, controlling chef who demanded perfection at every turn. In his place stood a humble student eager to learn from a master. Their first project was a seasonal tasting menu designed to highlight local ingredients. Emily took charge of conceptualizing the dishes, drawing inspiration from the farmers market and her memories of simpler times. Marcus contributed by adding bold flourishes, smoky charred edges, vibrant sauces, unexpected textures that elevated the plates without overshadow marks of compromise. Together they crafted a menu that balanced elegance and innovation, restraint and flair. As they worked side by side, their dynamic shifted. Emily's quiet confidence grounded Marcus, teaching him the value of patience and intentionality. Meanwhile, Marcus's energy and enthusiasm reignited Emily's passion, reminding her of the joy she once found in creating something extraordinary. They challenged each other constantly, pushing boundaries while maintaining a deep respect for tradition. One afternoon, as they plated a particularly intricate dish, a roasted beet tartare with horseradish cream and candied pistachios, Marcus turned to Emily with a grin. You know, he said, this might be the best thing I've ever tasted, and I didn't even come up with half of it. Emily laughed, brushing a strand of hair from her face. That's because teamwork makes the dream work, she teased, quoting a phrase she'd heard somewhere. Marcus chuckled, shaking his head. Who would have thought I'd learn that lesson from you? Their partnership wasn't without its challenges. There were moments of frustration, disagreements over flavor profiles, and debates about plating techniques. But through it all, they maintained open communication, always prioritizing the food above their egos. It was a lesson Marcus never thought he'd embrace, but one that proved invaluable as they prepared to unveil their creation to the world. When the day finally came to test the menu on actual diners, nerves ran high. Marcus paced the kitchen, double-checking every detail while Emily calmly reassured the staff. Trust yourselves, she said gently. You've practiced these dishes dozens of times. Let them speak for themselves, and speak they did. From the moment the first course arrived at a table, the reaction was electric. Guests marveled at the balance of flavors, the artistry of the presentations, and the emotional depth of each bite. One diner, a food critic known for his scathing reviews, wrote a glowing article praising the menu as a symphony of taste and texture, executed with precision and heart. Another guest described the experience as like reading a novel, where every chapter leaves you wanting more. By the end of the night, Marcus and Emily stood in the kitchen, exhausted but exhilarated. The feedback had been overwhelmingly positive, far exceeding their expectations. For Marcus, it was validation that he was on the right path. For Emily, it was proof that she could still make an impact without sacrificing her integrity. As they cleaned up together, Marcus turned to Emily with a grateful smile. "Thank you," he said simply, "for trusting me, for believing in this, for reminding me why I started cooking in the first place." Emily returned his smile, her eyes warm with understanding. "Thank you for giving me a reason to come back," she replied, "even if it's just for a little while." In that moment, they both knew they were onto something special. Their partnership wasn't just about revamping a menu or earning rave reviews. It was about rediscovering the magic of cooking, one dish at a time. And as they looked toward the future, they realized that the possibilities were endless. The success of the seasonal tasting menu was just the beginning. What started as a tentative collaboration between Marcus and Emily quickly evolved into something neither of them had anticipated, a partnership that went far beyond revamping dishes. It became a shared mission to redefine what fine dining could mean, not just for their restaurant but for the culinary world at large. Word spread quickly about the transformation taking place at Langley's table. Critics who once dismissed Marcus as a flashy showman began revisiting his establishment, only to leave astonished by the depth and soulfulness of the food. Regular patrons noticed the shift too. The menus were fresher, more thoughtful, and infused with an authenticity that hadn't been there before. Each dish told a story, blending Marcus's bold creativity with Emily's refined elegance in ways that felt both innovative and timeless. But it wasn't just the food that changed. The atmosphere of the restaurant transformed as well. Under Emily's influence, Marcus encouraged his staff to approach their work with mindfulness and care. He implemented new practices, such as hosting weekly brainstorming sessions where everyone, from line cooks to servers, could contribute ideas. At first, the team was hesitant, unsure how much their input would truly matter. But when they saw their suggestions being incorporated into the menu, morale soared. The kitchen buzzed with energy, not from stress or competition, but from a sense of collective purpose. For Marcus, this marked a turning point. For years, he had ruled his restaurant like a dictator, demanding perfection without considering the human element behind the scenes. Now, inspired by Emily's collaborative spirit, he learned to lead with empathy. He realized that fostering a supportive environment didn't diminish excellence. It enhanced it. His staff responded in kind, working harder not out of fear of failure, but because they genuinely cared about creating something meaningful. Emily, too, found herself growing in unexpected ways. While she initially joined the project to help Marcus rediscover his passion, she soon discovered that the experience was reigniting her own. Cooking alongside him reminded her of the joy she used to feel experimenting with flavors and techniques, free from the pressures of running a Michelin-starred bistro. She also appreciated how Marcus valued her input, never dismissing her ideas even when they clashed with his own vision. Their differences became strengths rather than obstacles, pushing each other to explore uncharted territory. As their partnership deepened, so did their friendship. They spent countless hours discussing everything from childhood memories to future aspirations, finding common ground despite their contrasting personalities. Marcus admired Emily's humility and wisdom, while Emily respected Marcus's ambition and willingness to grow. Together, they struck a balance that neither could achieve alone, one rooted in mutual respect and trust. Their next big challenge came when Marcus proposed expanding their collaboration beyond the restaurant. "What if we hosted pop-up events?" he suggested one evening as they sat in his office going over notes. "We could take our food to places where people least expect it, community centers, parks, even rooftops. Imagine bringing fine dining to those who wouldn't normally have access to it." Emily raised an eyebrow, intrigued but skeptical. "That sounds ambitious," she said. "Are you sure your ego can handle serving food on paper plates?" Marcus laughed, holding up his hands in mock surrender. Fair point. But hear me out. What if we stripped away all the pretense? No white tablecloths, no fancy silverware, just good food, served with heart. Wouldn't that be powerful? It was an idea that resonated deeply with Emily. Throughout her career, she had often felt constrained by the exclusivity of high-end restaurants, where only a select few could afford to indulge. The thought of sharing her craft with a wider audience excited her. All right, she said after a moment's consideration. Let's do it, but let's make it meaningful. Let's use these events to give back, to communities, to causes we care about. And so, the duo embarked on a series of pop-up dinners that captured the imagination of the city. Their first event took place in a local park, where long communal tables were set up under twinkling string lights. Guests ranged from families enjoying a night out to couples celebrating special occasions, all eager to taste the creations of two chefs whose names had become synonymous with innovation. The menu featured dishes inspired by global cuiseries, paying homage to the diverse cultures that shaped the city. Every plate was accompanied by a note explaining its origins, encouraging diners to reflect on the stories behind the food. The response was overwhelming. Attendees raved not only about the quality of the food but also about the sense of connection they felt during the meal. Strangers bonded over shared plates, exchanging stories and laughter as they savored each bite. Local media covered the event extensively, praising Marcus and Emily for using their platform to promote inclusivity and community engagement. Encouraged by the success of the first pop-up, they decided to organize more events, each with a unique theme and purpose. One evening, they partnered with a nonprofit organization supporting underserved youth, donating proceeds from ticket sales to fund culinary scholarships. Another time, they collaborated with urban farmers to highlight sustainable agriculture, incorporating locally sourced ingredients into every course. With each event, their reputation grew, not as celebrities chasing fame, but as advocates for positive change through food. Despite the accolades pouring in, Marcus and Emily remained grounded. They refused to let the attention go to their heads, reminding themselves daily why they had started this journey in the first place. For Marcus, it was about rediscovering the humanity in cooking, breaking free from the rigid expectations that had defined his career for so long. For Emily, it was about reclaiming her love for the craft without losing sight of the simplicity and peace she cherished. Their evolving dynamic also attracted attention outside the culinary world. Journalists began writing profiles on their unlikely partnership, marveling at how two individuals with such different backgrounds could come together to create something so impactful. Some called them the yin and yang of modern gastronomy, while others hailed their collaboration as proof that growth often stems from embracing vulnerability. One particularly memorable interview stood out. Sitting across from a journalist, in a quiet cafe, Marcus fielded questions about his transformation. When asked what had changed since meeting Emily, he paused, choosing his words carefully. "She taught me that cooking isn't about proving yourself to others," he said. "Finally, it's about connecting with the ingredients, with the people around you, with yourself. I spent years chasing validation, but now I realize the real reward is in the process, not the outcome." Emily, sitting beside him, nodded in agreement. "And he reminded me that stepping out of your comfort zone doesn't mean losing who you are," she added. "Sometimes it means discovering parts of yourself you didn't know existed." Their words resonated with readers, inspiring many to rethink their own approaches to life and work. Chefs around the world began citing their partnership as a model for how to blend artistry with authenticity, ambition with humility. Even critics who had once dismissed Marcus as a self-centered showman admitted that his evolution was nothing short of remarkable. By the end of the year, Langley's table had earned a coveted spot on several best restaurants lists, thanks largely to the reinvented menu and inclusive philosophy championed by Marcus and Emily. Yet neither of them viewed the recognition as the ultimate goal. Instead, they saw it as validation that they were on the right path, a reminder that food has the power to unite, inspire, and heal. As they prepared for their largest pop-up yet, an outdoor feast celebrating the city's cultural diversity, Marcus, turned to Emily with a smile. "Can you believe how far we've come?" he asked, his voice tinged with awe. Emily chuckled, shaking her head. "I think the better question is, where will we go next?" They exchanged a knowing glance, aware that their journey was far from over. Whatever lay ahead, they were ready to face it together, not as rivals or colleagues, but as true partners united by a shared vision. And in that moment, surrounded by the hum of activity and the promise of new beginnings, they knew they had created something extraordinary, not just for themselves, but for everyone fortunate enough to share in their story. Months turned into a year, and the impact of Marcus and Emily's partnership continued to ripple far beyond the walls of Langley's table. What had begun as a tentative collaboration had blossomed into a movement, a celebration of food, community, and connection that transcended traditional boundaries. Their pop-up events became the talk of the city, drawing crowds not just for the exceptional cuisine, but for the sense of belonging they fostered. Each gathering felt less like a meal and more like a shared experience, where strangers became friends and stories intertwined over plates of carefully crafted dishes. Their largest event yet, an outdoor feast celebrating the city's cultural diversity, was held on a crisp autumn evening in a sprawling park. The air was alive with anticipation as hundreds of guests streamed in, greeted by the aroma of sizzling spices and freshly baked bread wafting through the cool breeze. Long, communal tables stretched across the venue, adorned with vibrant flowers and hand-painted signs representing different cultures. Local musicians played soulful melodies, adding to the festive atmosphere. Marcus and Emily stood side by side near the entrance, watching as families, couples, and solo diners mingled under twinkling fairy lights strung between trees. It was a scene neither could have imagined when they first met in that cooking class. Back then, their worlds seemed impossibly far apart, one driven by ego, the other by quiet introspection. Now they were united by a shared mission, to remind people of the joy and humanity that food could bring. "This is incredible," Marcus said softly, his voice tinged with awe as he surveyed the crowd. "I never thought we'd pull something like this off." Emily smiled, her eyes scanning the lively scene. "Neither did I," she admitted. "But here we are. Look at them. All these people coming together, sharing something meaningful. That's what it's all about, isn't it?" Marcus nodded, his chest swelling with pride. Not for himself, but for what they had created together. For years he had chased fame and recognition, believing that success was measured by awards and accolades. But standing there, surrounded by laughter and chatter, he realized how hollow those pursuits had been compared to the fulfillment he felt now. The menu for the evening was a masterpiece, blending flavors from every corner of the globe. There were empanadas inspired by Latin American street vendors, fragrant biryanis paying homage to South Asian traditions, and delicate dumplings reminiscent of East Asian kitchens. Desserts ranged from French-inspired tarts to Middle Eastern baklava dripping with honey. Every dish came with a card explaining its origin, encouraging diners to reflect on the rich tapestry of cultures that made up their city. As the night unfolded, Marcus and Emily moved among the tables, chatting with guests and hearing their reactions firsthand. One elderly woman tearfully recounted how the biryani reminded her of meals her grandmother used to make back in India. A young couple gushed about the empanadas, saying they tasted exactly like the ones sold outside their favorite soccer stadium in Argentina. Even children eagerly devoured plates of colorful dumplings, giggling as they tried to use chopsticks. For Emily, these moments were priceless. She had always believed that food was a universal language, capable of bridging gaps and fostering understanding. Seeing her philosophy come to life in such a tangible way filled her with a profound sense of gratitude. And for Marcus, witnessing the genuine connection sparked by their work reinforced why he had fallen in love with cooking in the first place. By the end of the evening, the event had raised thousands of dollars for local charities, further cementing its legacy as both a culinary triumph and a force for good. As the last guest departed, Marcus and Emily lingered behind, helping the staff clean up. It was a habit they had developed together, a reminder that no matter how successful they became, they would always remain grounded in the hard work and teamwork that had brought them this far. "You know," Marcus said as they packed away the final supplies, "I think this might be the best thing we've ever done." Emily glanced at him, her expression thoughtful. "It's definitely up there," she agreed. "But I think the real reward is knowing we're making a difference, not just in people's stomachs but in their hearts." Her words stayed with Marcus long after they left the park that night. Driving home, he reflected on how much he had grown since meeting Emily. She had taught him to slow down, to listen, and to value the process over the outcome. In return, he had shown her that stepping out of her comfort zone didn't mean abandoning her principles. It meant expanding them. Together, they had created something greater than either could have achieved alone. In the months that followed, their influence only grew. Food critics hailed their partnership as a turning point in modern gastronomy, praising their ability to blend artistry with accessibility. Culinary schools invited them to speak, eager to learn how they balanced innovation with inclusivity. Even rival chefs, once dismissive of Marcus's flashy persona or Emily's quiet humility, began reaching out for advice on how to adapt their own approaches. But perhaps the most significant change occurred within themselves. Marcus, once defined by his need for validation, found peace in collaboration. He no longer felt the urge to prove himself constantly. Instead, he focused on creating experiences that mattered. Emily, who had walked away from fame to find simplicity, discovered that she could still make an impact without sacrificing her well-being. Her journey proved that success wasn't a one-size-fits-all concept. It was deeply personal, shaped by individual values and goals. One day, as they sat together, in the restaurant's kitchen during a rare quiet moment, Marcus turned to Emily with a grin. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't assigned you that soufflé recipe?" Emily laughed, shaking her head. "Honestly, I try not to think about it too much, but I'm glad things worked out the way they did." "Me too," Marcus said sincerely. "You've changed my life, Em. I don't know where I'd be without you." Her smile softened, touched by his honesty. "And you've changed mine," she replied. "Sometimes all it takes is someone willing to see you differently for everything to shift." Their conversation shifted to plans for the future. They dreamed of opening a smaller, more intimate space, a place where they could experiment freely without the pressure of running a high-profile restaurant. They envisioned workshops and mentorship programs aimed at nurturing the next generation of chefs, particularly those from underrepresented communities. Above all, they wanted to continue using food as a tool for connection and healing. When the time came to announce their decision to scale back operations at Langley's table, the news sent shockwaves through the culinary world. Some speculated that they were retiring. Others assumed they had creative differences. But in a heartfelt letter posted online, Marcus and Emily explained their reasoning. "We've learned that true success isn't about chasing bigger and better," they wrote. "It's about staying true to your values and making choices that align with your purpose. This next chapter is about focusing on what matters most: family, community, and the simple joy of cooking." Their announcement was met with an outpouring of support. Fans praised their courage and authenticity, while fellow chefs expressed admiration for their willingness to step away from the spotlight. Though Langley's table eventually closed its doors, its legacy lived on through the countless lives it had touched, and through the new ventures Marcus and Emily embarked upon. Years later, when asked about their partnership, Marcus often joked that it was a happy accident. But deep down, he knew it was more than that. Meeting Emily had been a catalyst for growth, forcing him to confront his flaws and embrace vulnerability. And for Emily, working with Marcus had reignited her passion for cooking in ways she never expected. Together, they proved that even the simplest acts of kindness and humility could create something extraordinary. Through their shared vision, they transformed not only their careers but also the industry itself, reminding everyone that food, at its core, is about bringing people together.